This is Time is Money, where the clock is always ticking and money is always moving. I'm Thomas Hendricks of Chrono24 in New York City. Today we've got an in-depth look at our extensive watch collection data set from over 1.3 million Chrono24 users, comprising of more than 3.7 million watches registered. That's approximately 6% of watches worldwide by value, with a watch collection value of roughly 42 billion euros. And with that in mind, here are our 3 signs of the times for March 2023. Collectors in one country have seen an almost 10% depreciation in the last 12 months, but nearly 40% lifetime growth. We analyze watch collection values around the world to uncover which countries' collectors have fared the best financially. Want to know which watches are the most collected by Chrono24 users? We'll tell you. This is great information if you're looking to resell easily or if you want a watch that stands out from the crowd. Stay tuned for that. Finally, you may think Italians buy Panerai, the French buy Cartier, and the Japanese love Grand Seikos, but the data tells us otherwise. Stick around to find out the real watch brand preferences by country and what cultural factors may influence brand preference. A bit of context to start. You've probably seen this watch collection link in the top bar on Chrono24. Here, users are able to track the changing values of watches they own or would like to own. This tool isn't for everyone, but if you're an invested-minded person who likes following the stock market, then give it a go. Now that we've established some context, let's dive into the numbers. We begin today with a look at changing watch collection values in a country-by-country comparison. We're focusing today on watches that people have purchased, whether on Chrono24, at auction, from an authorized dealer, or wherever you buy watches. Again, that's data from 3.7 million watches owned by 1.3 million users altogether. We're going to start with one country on the extremes, and it's one with expensive taste. The median watch value among Hong Kong collectors on Chrono24 is 77,500 euros, the most of any country. Collectors here have had a rough year, losing 9.2% in market value, but gaining 38% on average from the time of purchase to the present. This follows the general trend for high-priced watch collections, whether you're in Dubai or Tokyo. By the way, the UAE and Japan come in at number 2 and number 3 respectively for average individual collection value. Expensive watches shot up the most in price, but also have the most to lose. At this moment, those collectors still have good reason to celebrate, with 30 to 40% lifetime profits on average. But as we mentioned in our last episode of Time is Money, hype watches like the AP Royal Oak and the Patek Philippe Nautilus are still falling in market value. Aside from a few outliers, the data for the top 20 most represented countries is quite tightly grouped. Perhaps the most average country based on global data is the United States. American collectors on Chrono24 own 6.2 watches per person. They are 4.2% in the red compared to March of 2022, but in the black by 31% in lifetime value. This is a fairly sunny picture when compared to stock market values during the same period. While most of the media attention, including ours, has centered on the high-risk, high-reward world of hype watches, there's a larger story that's neither boom nor bust. For some outside expertise on this topic, we brought in special guest Dr. Brendan Cunningham. Dr. Cunningham, thanks so much for coming on today.
It's a real pleasure to join you. Thank you so much, Thomas.
Your work on economics and watches is all over the place, but for those who might not know you, can you introduce yourself briefly?
Hi, yes, my name is Brendan. I'm a professor of economics at Eastern Connecticut State University. I've been teaching and publishing in the field of economics for over 10 years, and in the recent years I've been writing a bit about the watch industry and thinking a fair bit about the watch industry and contributing to a few different publications, and I find it to be an absolutely fascinating market and a fascinating topic.
I know you also have written a book and run a blog as well. For those who might be interested more in your work, where can they find you?
They can find me, my blog is horolonomics.com, and the book I wrote is called Selling the Crown, The Secret History of Marketing Rolex, which people can find on Amazon.
Very good, very good. Now let's dive into the data, shall we?
That sounds great.
You're in a unique position because, as we've seen, watches have become more commodities over the last few years, and there have been a lot of ups and downs in the market, to say the least, in recent years. For a little bit of context, can you zoom out and tell us how the watch market kind of fits into this global economic picture?
Sure. So I think the days we're living in right now are sort of a good example of the reason that why some people claim that may you live in interesting times is sort of both a blessing and a curse. We've seen a lot of warning signs blaring for a little while now that we were in for a rough road when it comes to the economy, both in the United States and in a lot of other countries around the world. And the events of the past, even the past week, have suggested that those warning signs were onto something. We've seen the second largest bank in American history go into default. And so one of the ways you can think about watches within that context is that, comparatively speaking, they're sort of a safe place to store value. So when I wake up in the morning and I go to my watch box, I don't have to worry if a bank manager is having a really super bad day. I know that watch is going to be there for me, unless there's something really bad that's happened in my house. And so often what we see during recessions and turbulent times in the economy is sort of a flight to those kinds of assets that have low or minimum default risk, and yeah, there's no sense in which someone operating my Tudor North Flag is going to default and I'll lose it. So that's kind of how I think about watches. One of their advantages is that they can be a somewhat stable store of value, although you do have to be careful because as we've seen, some particular references have seen sort of corrections in their value.
And there's a lot of momentum, both upwards and downwards, in the market. If you had to pull out your crystal ball, where do you think things might be going in the watch market, given the kind of monetary tightening that we see in the larger economy?
Well, I'd actually am gonna sort of turn towards a brand that has had an incredible amount of success over the past 80 years or maybe longer in order to answer that question, and that brand is Rolex. So there's been recent announcements that Rolex is actually putting online new factories and capacity to expand production. And I don't think a whole lot of people have made a whole lot of money betting against Rolex and Rolex's decisions. And so when I look at what they're doing and the investment they're making in their capability to produce watches, it really suggests to me that that the folks there believe this is certainly maybe a time where there might be some bumps in the road, but if we wait long enough, the ship will sort of right itself, and sort of the reverse of everything that goes up must go down is that everything that goes down must go up. So I do think the future is bright for watch collectors and watches themselves and the industry as a whole.
Dr. Cunningham, thanks so much for coming on today. It's been a pleasure to have your experience on this topic.
Thank you so much, Thomas. It was really fun. Thank you for inviting me.
This Time is Money series is focused on the watch market, including what people are buying, what they're selling, and what collectors are holding on to. By analyzing the collecting habits of over 1 million users, we can get a good idea of what's hot and what's not. The Formula One fans in the audience will enjoy this next bit because we're looking at the top 10 brands on the grid. At number 1, the most purchased brand on Chrono24, no surprise, it's Rolex. The Crown is far and away the most popular brand on the platform, making up, on average, 30 to 40% of Chrono24 watch collections. You can say Rolex is like the Max Verstappen here, a runaway favorite and not too friendly either. Omega sits at number 2 and occupies about 10% of watch collections around the world. Omega is almost twice as popular as Tudor at number 3, although sitting in that third place has got to be a confidence boost for the Tudor brand and Tudor fans alike. That's like AlphaTauri getting a podium position behind Red Bull and Mercedes. Perennial favorite Seiko sits at number 4, followed by heavyweight Patek Philippe at number 5. The bottom half of the top 10 includes Breitling at number 6 and Tag Heuer at number 7, ahead of Audemars Piguet, IWC, and Cartier rounding out the top 10. The takeaway here is this. If you want a watch that's easy to sell, focus on those top brands. And if you want a watch that's a little more unique, either avoid those same brands or be willing to dig deeper into their archives and catalogs. Bit of advice, if you're looking for a deeper cut, consider vintage Heuer or vintage Eberhard. Those brands make up only a fraction of a percentage point of collections on average, despite rising popularity among collectors and auction houses. For our final segment, we're looking at brand preferences by region. It's a fanboy census, and the results reveal some surprising details. Let's start with some instances of national pride where collectors buy from watch brands based in their home countries. You may not be too shocked to learn that Germans buy the most Nomos watches on the site, or that France buys the most Bell & Ross, or that the Brits love Tudor more than anyone else. However, it's not always root for the home team. Who buys the most Panerai, for example? It's not Italy. In fact, Taiwanese collectors purchase 3 times more Panerais than the Italians. When it comes to Seiko, Japan is not their '1 base of support on the platform. That honor goes to Finland. And the French, stylish and sophisticated as they are not the primary buyers of Cartier. Mexico collects twice as many Cartiers as anyone else, including the French. Switzerland is known for Swiss chocolate, Swiss bank accounts, and Swiss watches. So what are they buying? Well, like everyone else, they love Rolex the most, with the crown occupying about 35% of Swiss collections on Chrono24. However, the neutral nation is also the top market for IWC. Next, let's follow the money and look at Patek and AP. The top 5 countries for Patek collecting on Chrono24 are all in Asia. Thailand is at number 1, followed by China, Taiwan, Indonesia, and Hong Kong. It's a similar scenario for Audemars Piguet, with the brand making up about 12.7% of Chinese watch collections on Chrono24. Taiwan comes in at second there with 7.2%. We'll end this segment on a qualitative note with an observation from one of our data analysts who pointed out that the more hierarchical cultures tend to gravitate towards higher priced watches. Essentially, the more layers of status a society has, the more people collect traditional status symbols. That might explain why Patek and AP are so popular in Asia. There's also an emphasis on longevity in these cultures typically. And what's Patek's tagline after all? You never actually own a Patek Philippe, you merely look after it for the next generation. Conversely, what do those egalitarians in Scandinavian countries collect? Well, they tend to buy more Omega than anywhere else in the world. And doesn't that fit with the brand? A recognizable status symbol of quality, but not something that begs to be recognized either. There you have it, a snapshot of the secondary watch market for March 2023. I'm Thomas Hendricks with Chrono24. Thanks for watching Time is Money, because time only moves in one direction, but the market does not. We'll see you next time.